Your conversations are now being recorded. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, have your notes out. We're going to be continuing on looking at, actually this is really good. We finished all of the Native American becomes Latin America. We're not quizzing you on chapter 19, nor on any of the chapters, frankly, because we're trying to get through this unit fairly quickly. Although there's one thing I am going to do in here, which is take you through the movie about the abolition of the slave trade. It's called Amazing Grace. You'll see it on the near the top third of the back page, so that we can get some practice at walking you through analyzing information about a movie that turns out to be not exactly true, and why that movie director may have made that change. Today I'm going to walk you through the assignment that I'm giving you that is due March 5th. Monday, March 5th? That's not right. Friday, March 5th. Oh, I mistyped on that one. The handout that I gave you, sorry, typo, should be Friday, March 5th that it's due to you. I just noticed that. Okay, which for you guys actually, the reality is you'll probably want to turn it in on Thursday, March 5th, because that's when you guys are going to be in here. That would be the blue day. And we'll take you through this particular assignment. We'll give you some practice on what kinds of possible reasons there would be for not presenting history exactly as it occurred, which is an interesting take when you're doing a movie. Okay? So we're going to be taking you through Muslim empires today in the Middle East and India. Go as far as we can on that. And my goal is to get to a point so that when we come back after the break, we'll start the film in class. And we'll walk you through it, pausing occasionally to have a discussion on that and so forth. Yeah. In the meantime, you guys go ahead and take out this sheet in front of you, the one that I gave you, and we'll walk you through this particular assignment. It's a 10-point assignment. You want to make sure it's done by the 5th of March, or you can scratch that and put the 4th of March, because that's when you're going to be coming to class. What you do in this particular assignment is a small fraction of what you're doing on the larger film critique. Okay? I have assigned all of you films. In fact, some of you guys got exactly, I think everybody in here actually got their number one pick or something close to it. Some of you guys asked for, pick me a winner, Mr. Hansen, and so I did. Get started on the research. You can get it changed. Come and see me. Usually there's about 5 to 10% of students who want it changed for one reason or another, lack of availability, whatever. But come see me soon so that, if you're coming to me like on the, first part of April and going, Mr. Hansen, can I change it? Yeah. Can I have an extension on the paper? No. So get started on the research right away, availability of the film, and also the resources. And some of the films, every once in a while, there'll be like tricky stuff. So like, it's just a little bit harder to research. Anyway, that's going to be up to you. Do this assignment, and you're going to be off to a good start. So here's what you do with the assignment. In fact, some of it you can write down right away. Some of you guys will prefer typing it out. Frankly, that might be a little bit easier as you get to the bottom part. You can type it, print it, attach it to the back here. But just for the sake of this, number one, you can write down the name of your movie, right? What is the name of your film? That's worth a point. That's cool. Obviously, you want to have that correct and the spelling correct when you're doing the research. And today, doing the research on these movies is a lot easier. Name a movie and historical accuracy or authenticity. Okay? Or you could put in the name of the key person who's associated with the movie and then research that. I think you're going to be able to be okay. I've noticed since the time I've started assigning this particular research project, it's gotten easier. And last year, I was really pleased with the results of the students, the 9th graders last year. So many people did really good papers, and we're getting huge percentages of the, how much is this paper worth? 100 points. Oh my gosh. That's huge. Yeah. So, do a good job on it. Then, number 2, when you're doing your paper, you're going to need to be talking about the choices that the film director makes as far as, why did they do it this way? Why did they do it that way? So you need to know the name of the film director. Everybody know the name of the film director for your particular film? You know? Yours already? You just looked it up. Yeah, who's the film director? You've never heard of him? But you're writing it down, though, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just assigned him a movie you'd never even heard of. Captain Phillips. You guys ever seen that one with Tom Hanks? You have seen it. It's pretty good, huh? Yeah. So anyway, you got the film director. Now, number 3, now we're starting to get into particulars. This is, I want to give you practice on these kinds of things because these are the areas that in the past students have messed up and not done well on their papers because they didn't do certain things correctly. Okay? A work cited. You need to have the correct way of citing the particular source. You're going to ultimately have 3 or more sources in your paper, but find one source and put it in there. Okay? As you can see, there's ways of doing it incorrectly, like just listing the web address. That is not an official way to cite the source. A lot of times it will include the date that you access that particular source. Sometimes your source has an author. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it, I imagine a lot of the sources you guys are going to use are going to be web-based. But use EasyBib. There's other kinds of programs on the internet that will help you to figure out how to cite something. And they're really easy to use. It's like they give you a template and you just type in the various different component parts to it, and then it appears. Which is why probably I'm guessing some of you guys would prefer to do this assignment like on your computer and then print it and attach it to the back. Really, only number 1 and 2 are easy just to handwrite out. The other ones, it's more helpful because you do ultimately have like web addresses in there, and those are just kind of a pain. It's much easier if you just cut and paste those. Okay? So there's number 3, works cited. All right? Now, in your paper, you're going to have a whole bunch of these things that are shown up here for number 4. Using a complete sentence, identify one thing you found about your film that is either false or a mixture of truth and fiction. Use the proper MLA in text, that is the parenthetical reference citation method, to cite your source. You place it inside the parentheses at the end of each sentence. Do not put the entire citation inside the parentheses. And so I gave you an example from the paper, the sample paper I gave you. So the sentence is, when watching the film, you'll see Captain Dahl was stabbed to death. Experts believe he was not dead because on the cockpit tape, you can hear someone moaning in the background throughout the flight. Parentheses, chasing the frog. Which is how you would do it properly in MLA. It'll vary depending on what the source is, but the quick takeaway is it's a short synopsis. It's like the author's name or the article name or the source name, but it's not like the whole URL. Yeah, that always bugs me. I wish they'd change that. You're probably right. I know. Yeah. I hate it when, anyway. Yeah, and it's tough because, like, when I'm doing papers and so forth with students and using all kinds of various different sources and they get MLA questions, I'm like, I'm not entirely sure. I've seen that and I hate that. Because, like, come on, end this sentence. But you're right, yeah. So, yeah. I think I changed that one because I just Mr. Hansen's version of MLA. But I don't think you can't make up your own different things there. Does number 4 make sense to you? Okay. Every once in a while, people like to do a Chicago-style thing, which is footnotes and so forth. But just for this paper, get familiar with using the MLA if you haven't done so already. Okay. Now, flip over to number 5. Okay. And again, you can type these out and just attach it to this, which is fine. Or you can handwrite it on here if you want. Either way, just make sure that you get it done. Number 5, and this is very important because as you're going through the paper, you need to be giving examples of why you think the film director chose to put the inaccurate information in the film. Why? Why do you suppose the film director did that? Sometimes you'll get an answer from the film director. A lot of times you won't. You'll just sort of have to speculate. And a lot of times it sort of fits into like the dramatic effect kind of part, Or if it's a Disney movie, well, this is for kids, and that would really scare them if we showed them the real truth. Or, time, there's not as much time and so forth. So there'll be a variety of things. Do you have a question? Yeah, you said, okay. So then here's the example there. Greengas made that mistake because he never really had a chance to speak with his wife, Sandy Dahl, until after the movie was released. Now, you never have to cite that. If you found it from a source, you would have to cite it. But if it's just your thinking, you don't have to put a cite after that. Does that make sense? You guys think you can do this? Oh, yeah, I think you can. Again, with this, it's just sort of a way of making sure that students know what I expect. It's right here. If you run into any problems, I will be able to identify it so that it doesn't impact you writing a great paper. You guys happy with your film choices? If you're not, come see me, okay? And we'll get that taken care of. Any questions? I think I've given you guys plenty of time. You've got over the break to get started on this, and that will be, that's like the Friday, not the first Friday after the break, but the second Friday, or Thursday in your guys' case. Okay? Questions? Okay, let's get to this. All right. We want to look and see around the entire world between 1450 and 1750. We spent a lot of time looking at Europe, okay? And we spent a little bit of time now, and we will continue looking at the Americas as impacted by the arrival of the Europeans. Next, we're going to look at 3 different particular areas in the Middle East and Southern Asia. Areas where civilization started. You can write this down. The Middle East and Southern India were among the very earliest civilizations. Things that you guys covered in, I want to say like 5th grade. You guys did like ancient Rome and Greece. It's not 5th or 7th grade. When did you guys do ancient Rome? You're like, I think 6th grade. I know it's changed up a little bit and so forth. But you've done it already. And of course that was taking place in the Middle East. Well, during this particular time period, here's the theme. We're going to look at the Ottoman Empire, which is going to be right there. We look at the Persian Empire, which, with this map, we're going to see it's kind of over here, present-day Iran. And then we'll look at India, which is just a little bit further to the east. And we're going to see a pattern develop of those 3 during this time period. And it basically is going to fit into this. It rises, and then they tend to collapse. Got it? A rise and a tendency to collapse. And with all of these, none of them are going to be able to keep up with ultimately what's happening in Europe. Okay? It's going to be sort of like, I don't know, if you look around and somebody, let's say, in the 7th grade was like, man, they had it all together. But you check in on them in the 9th and 10th and 11th grade, and it's like, wow, they're really not keeping up so well. And meanwhile, somebody who wasn't doing so well in the early grades, Europe, they're just kicking it. And they're starting to put themselves in a position to dominate the world. Because that's what comes out of this particular time period. Europe is going to be moving into an imperial position. Okay? So, let's get into some of the specifics here. We're going to start with the Ottoman Empire. We're going to say some things about the Ottoman Empire. First of all, it takes place in that particular region. It is going to start out small. It's going to be very dynamic in its early stages. It's going to grow, but eventually it'll start becoming a little bit too old, too stagnant, and start losing over time period. Okay? In fact, it's interesting because on this particular map, take a look here. The yellow is where it starts, in and around the city of Constantinople, which was the old capital city of the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. They'll change the name of that capital city to Istanbul. And that will be the capital city of the Ottoman Empire. That's going to be the capital city where the Turks are, and they're going to start taking over a vast amount of territory. At the heart of it, ultimately, is the country we know today as Turkey. But they're going to have a lot of Southeast Europe. In fact, write that down. They're going to ultimately have a lot of Southeast Europe. They'll even come close to conquering Vienna, the Austrian capital. At the height of the Ottoman Empire, they're going to put a lot of pressure on those Europeans in Austria. They're going to conquer this area known today as Iraq and a lot of northern Africa, Saudi Arabia region. I mean, they're a very big country establishing themselves there. One of the areas that they take control from are the Mongols. The Mongols had established a lot of control right through this area, and as the Mongols recede, you've got this big Ottoman Empire coming into existence. We sort of looked at the growth of the Ottoman Empire before when we looked at, remember when we had all those Renaissance states in Italy, like Florence and Rome and Venice, and they were trading a lot through this area, through the getting in contact with the Mongol Empire and making a lot of money. You can put this down. When the Ottoman Empire establishes itself there, it doesn't necessarily cut off all the trade, it just makes it much more expensive. But we already figured out, for the Europeans, how do they get around this new sort of obstacle of the Ottoman Empire? If they want to trade with India or with China, rather than go through the Ottoman Empire, how do they get there? Addie, how do they get there? If you don't want to go by land, you can go to China by boat, right? Remember all those new trade routes that were established by the Portuguese and by the Spanish and so forth to get to the Orient? That was why, you know, if you go to Italy today, you're like, wow, they really did pretty well during the Renaissance. But by the time the Ottoman Empire gets really big, their days of being in the prime trading position are gone. Okay? So the Ottoman Empire is a big, big deal. How do they do it? Here's one thing you do need to know. It's Muslim. The Ottoman Turks are Muslim. Okay? So this is going to be one of the things we'll actually see which is in common for these three. The Ottoman Turks are Muslim. They have been converted as Turks to Islam, and then they conquer, or they're attacking, this capital city of Constantinople. And how do they do it? Here's the guy that's going to accomplish the task. His name is pronounced Mehmed, okay? And I've assigned to you, I think, 2 videos, because one deals with the Ottomans, and then another deals with the Mughals. They're posted on Google Classroom. I want you to see them by the next time. They're like 10-minute clips from the Millennium series. Mehmed is going to be the guy who is going to conquer Constantinople and establish the beginning of this big, powerful Ottoman Empire. Well, here's a problem, because Constantinople has massive, thick walls. Very big, thick walls that make it very difficult to attack. Mehmed is going to have to figure out a way to conquer Constantinople by overcoming those big walls. And he does. And here's the answer. There's another view of the answer. It's the heavy cannon. The Ottoman Turkish heavy cannon. Different times in history, different military innovations are going to be either very helpful or maybe why are they still using those things? But this is a very, very important weapon that will be developed. And it's no easy thing to build. You have to be able to refine the development of iron to a cannon so that it will not explode in your face. You've got to make really, really high quality iron so that you can put a cannonball in it and launch that big, heavy cannonball to hit a wall. And when that thing does hit the wall, it's going to break the wall down. It's not very easy to move the cannon around, but hello, the target, the wall, it's not moving. So Mehmed can give credit to the Ottoman Turkish heavy cannon for breaking down the walls, or at least breaking down part of the walls, so that his armies can go flooding into Constantinople. You got that? But make note of this, because it's kind of like, that's our winning weapon. Is that a very good weapon to use like in a battlefield? where the enemy army is like moving around. It's kind of like you get this big thing and you point it at the direction of the army and at the enemy army, and they can see that big cannon pointing that direction. What are they going to do? Yeah, they're going to move over to the side. Okay? Very interesting. So like, what weapons are you going to use? We'll come up with those. But this is good against walls. Okay? Now, when Constantinople is conquered, pretty bad for the Christians in Constantinople. A lot of them are going to be killed and treated very, very badly. But when they conquer the city, it's such a big, beautiful, amazing city. The Muslim conquerors, the Turks, are going to look and go, that's a really, really beautiful church. Remember the Hagia Sophia? Remember where that fit in history? Do you remember who was trying to build a big, huge, beautiful Christian cathedral that would rival Hagia Sophia that the Eastern Orthodox have? Remember the Pope that did a whole massive fundraising effort to build St. Peter's Basilica? Yeah, kind of started off the Protestant Reformation. Got a jump start because they were doing all that fundraising up in the German areas and going, hey, you want your sins forgiven? Just hand over some money. We'll sell you indulgences. Well, an interesting thing happens to that church. You can write it down. It's right there. They didn't tear it down, the Muslims, the Turks. Bless you. They turned it into a mosque. How do you turn it into a mosque? If you guys know this, let's see if you can figure out what part is part of the original church and what part is part of the mosque. I will point. The dome. Original or not? Hands up for original. Hands up for it was added. Part of the original thing. The big dome was the amazing thing that was in there. All right, how about one of these 4 minarets? Hands up for original. You are all correct. Write it down. I'm sorry, you're incorrect. It is an added feature. It's okay. This is an architectural feature that you see a lot in mosques. Think of them as like Muslim churches, although that's kind of a Muslim temple. Anyway, just call it a mosque. Okay? So on the inside, you would definitely notice the difference. Because on the inside, you would have all kinds of images of Christ and Christian images and so forth covered up. And put this down. When you're talking about a mosque, let's see if you know this one. Who's the most important individual person in Islam? Besides Allah, which would be the Muslim rendition of saying God. Yeah? Muhammad. Who's Muhammad? Yeah, exactly. So he's like the prophet who wrote down the Quran and so forth. Very, very important person. Are there any images of Muhammad in any mosques? Make sure you write this down. No. It is a big no-no to do images of Muhammad. Within Islam, they don't want images of Muhammad. In fact, they don't want images of any human or any animal. If you go in a mosque, you will see all kinds of beautiful imagery, but it's of geometric shapes or floral shapes and things like that. All right? I mean, if you're in France and you're like, I think I'm going to do a cartoon that criticizes Muslim extremists, and I'm going to include an image of Muhammad, you know what some people are going to do to that cartoonist? They'll kill you. Have you heard of that? Yeah, so there was a cartoon magazine or something in Paris, and it got Charlie Hebdo, I think it was called, and it was attacked. And then there was a teacher in Paris trying to show the students and so forth, well, these are the kind of images that really make Muslim extremists really angry. Well, guess what? A Muslim extremist found that teacher and killed him on the streets of Paris. So anyway, just something to know. So if they're remaking the inside of Hagia Sophia, they cover up all the Christian imagery. When I visited there, it was no longer a mosque. They turned it into a museum. And so there were some places that had Christian imagery from the previous time. There was other images that were Muslim. So they were trying to run it as a museum. Apparently, very recently, it's been officially turned back into a mosque. Boy. Okay? So, big, huge, beautiful religious building. Starts out Christian, becomes Islam. It's Islam again. Okay? Suleiman the Magnificent is going to be among the great early Ottoman rulers. Okay? He's going to be one who will help Islam expand its territory, because this is going to be over a number of years as it expands and conquers and is very dynamic in those early years, sending Islamic Turkish armies to conquer more territory. One of the things, though, that Suleiman the Magnificent does, besides his really cool headgear, is he builds a brand new mosque, a series of mosques. But this is probably the most famous in Istanbul, which of course was previously known as Constantinople, the Süleymaniye Mosque. So big, amazing architectural feat. You've got the minarets. And of course, if you're in an Islamic city, from the top of one of those minarets, how many times a day does somebody call out the Islamic prayer? Anybody guys? You guys remember that? 5 times. Yeah, 5 times. And which direction do they point when they say their prayers? Toward Mecca, which is where Muhammad was from. Okay, and so that's like the most holy place for the Muslims. Let me see, that and Medina. Oh yes, and Jerusalem is a very important holy place for Muslims. Okay, all right. So well done there. Oh, and then the decline. Wow, we hardly even got to the height of the Muslim Turkish power and the Ottoman Empire. It's going to be very, very significant. But as you drag on further in time, you see this. Hopefully it's not going to happen so much for our country, but you see this at times in histories. Somebody will grow, a country or an empire will grow great, and then it declines. This actually is the decline of the Ottoman Empire, and it will finally be this sort of darkish brown part. That's the last of it by 1914. Wow, that was only like 100 years ago. And the Ottoman Turks will fight in World War I and lose. And then all that's left is Turkey. And it just becomes a regular country. So, a significant part. They'll run into challenges in Europe. They'll lose their African territories. The last parts they have taken away from them are in Arabia. Now, put this down. Got a couple things to point out. One of the biggest rivals that the Ottoman Turks have are with fellow Muslims in Persia. That's going to be the next empire we're going to talk about, the Safavid Persians. Okay? Persians are going to be right here, and there's going to be a lot of fighting in that border region between the Turks and the Persians. Both Muslim groups, but there's differences. I'm curious. It says so in the handout, but, in fact, you can see it there, I believe. Yes? Yeah, actually, maybe not. Are all Muslims the same when it comes to their belief system? They're not. Just as in Christianity, you have like Orthodox Christian, Catholic, Protestant. Any of you guys know the difference, the split within the Islamic community? What is the split? And it pretty much comes into 2 different parts, and I didn't write it down, but I'm going to put it up on the board. Anybody know? The sooner you guys can give an answer, the better. Does that not ring a bell? The one main group of Muslims around the world are known as Sunni. I'm not going to get into all the differences of all the details and so forth, but that's going to be the main Islamic variant for Muslims, Sunni. And write this down. The Turks are Sunni Muslims. The other variant is Shiite. That's how you pronounce that. Shiite. Sometimes referred to as Shia. The Persians are going to be predominantly Shiite. Again, I don't want to go into all the differences between a Sunni and a Shiite and so forth, but just to say that for Muslims, sometimes that difference is significant. And a Shiite might refer to a Sunni or vice versa as, you are the infidel, you are worse than any non-Muslim, you are spreading the improper Islamic religion, you should die. Okay, fine, sure. Among the Sunnis, the Turks, right? So the Ottoman Empire is predominantly Sunni. Shiites, the Persians are predominantly Shiite. All right, so let's talk about the Safavid Persian Empire. Here you can see is an area that is contested. When you look at that on a map, you're like, oh, that looks stripy. Yeah, it's contested. Modern-day Iraq was very much contested between the Ottoman Turks and the Persian Shiites, the Safavids. You're like, so what does that impact us? I mean, it's not like the United States is ever going to send in the military into that. Yet we did. Twice in my lifetime. Well, it's not like there's going to be problems within that country as far as which side we favor. Yep. Everybody know this? Have you guys ever heard of, like, ISIS? Have you heard of ISIS? Yeah, they kind of got knocked down a bit. Those were really bad. Those guys would grab people, cut off their heads and so forth. They're really, really extreme. Anybody know? ISIS, are they an extreme Sunni group or an extreme Shiite group? You know, like there, it sounds like they're pretty extreme one way or another. Turns out they were an extreme Shiite, a Sunni group. But I mean, if you're about to have your head cut off by an extremist, you know, it doesn't seem to matter one way or another. Okay? Well, let me tell you about the rise and fall of the Persians. One nice thing about this is the same Persia that was going toe-to-toe with the Greeks back in the day of Alexander the Great. How many of you guys know your ancient history? Alexander the Great? Who won between Alexander the Great and his armies versus the massive Persian Empire? Alexander the Great did. He conquered the whole Persian Empire in his lifetime. Pretty impressive. Okay? But the Persians bounced back. Who do you suppose conquered the entire Persian entity in the 1200s? In addition to conquering a whole bunch of other people, including the Russians and Chinese and so forth. And they came from East Asia, and they were the first major power that we talked about in this course. No, not the British. Who was the great big empire that was created? Write it down. The Mongols. The Mongols had conquered the Persians. And you're like, wait a minute, the Mongols grew and then they weakened. There's another introduction to the Mongols had conquered Persia, and so this version of the Persian Empire, the Safavid Persian Empire, is going to shake off the control of the Mongols. Okay? So, got all kinds of different folks that are shaking off the control of the Mongols. When we get to China, it's going to be the same thing. Oh, wow, guess who's in charge of China again? The Chinese, because they're going to defeat the Mongols. And we saw that with Russia. They shake off the control of the Mongols, and they're in control of their areas again. Okay? The leader of, and first, the original dynamic leader of the Safavid Persians is this guy right here, Shah Ismail. Shah is a title. It is a title that is often used in that particular part of the world. The Shah, the leader, the ruler. And they will reconquer the base territory. Obviously going to be fighting with the Turks over here. They're also going to be fighting quite a bit over there in their northeast part, which is another part of the world that is familiar to you. Raise your hand if you can tell me, besides United States troops going into Iraq, what other country in that part of the world, depicted right there, have the United States got troops actually still there right now? Anybody know? Starts with an A. Rhymes with Fastganistan. Afghanistan, yeah. So the Persians are actually going to get bogged down fighting in Afghanistan. Wow, that's not going to be the first time that'll happen in history. An outside group, this kind, the Persians, fighting in Afghanistan, trying to conquer that mountainous area, and the local people fighting them off. It's going to be a big, big challenge. Okay? Here's what you want to know about the Persians. We talked about a military component for the Turks, the big cannon that helped them to conquer Constantinople. The Persians are going to make use of the light cannon in some of their key battles with the Turks. Write it down. The light cannon, if you're like, well, I couldn't pick that up by myself, But notice this. You can maneuver that on wheels in a battlefield. So if you're pointing at the enemy and the enemy moves a bit, you pivot. You move the cannon to a position where you can fire at them. Now here's a key component. First, way to go, Persians. You figured out that it's good in battlefield situations to have weapons that you can maneuver. Like if you're going to be fighting against the Turks and they got their big cannon sitting there, you just run away from them. But the Turks are going to have a hard time running away from the English-like cannon. Here's the other thing you need to notice about this. The English-like cannon? Oh. The Persians hired the Shirley brothers. What? That's actually part of the notes. Shirley brothers. They're like cannon manufacturers, and they're really good at not only manufacturing them, but they can come over and show you how to use their product in a battle. This is one of those signs where, this is why we did Europe first. The Europeans developed some pretty darn good technologies, and they come up with the very, very helpful light cannon. Are they willing to sell it to the Persians? Yeah, for the right amount of money. You know, sucks if you're English later on, you get into a fight with the Persians, but they're willing to do that. They're capable of doing it. This isn't one of those signs that the Europeans are making some real headway here. Okay? And make sure you put this down. The Persians are going to run into some very difficult times fighting in Afghanistan, and it weakens them. Lesson from history that we're dealing with right now. If you send in an army into Afghanistan, we found that the people there are very primitive, but they can drag out a fight over a long period of time. See if you guys know this. The United States military has been fighting in Afghanistan since, you guys have any idea? Anybody know? Yeah. That is correct. Yeah, you can make a little note off to the side. The United States has had a military since 2001. Have we completely annihilated the enemy that we set out to annihilate? No. Are they making a comeback? What do I expect might happen like within the next, 4 years? Because President Trump was talking about doing this, and I haven't heard much different from President Biden. Maybe leaving. Yeah. Why did we go in there in 2001? Do you know? What did people in Afghanistan ever do to us that would make us so mad, yeah? Yeah, they allowed for the people who trained for 9/11 to actually train in Afghanistan. So, those guys like Osama bin Laden, he was from Saudi Arabia, and he went to train in Afghanistan, and then they attacked us, and we're like, yeah, we're going to overthrow your stupid government because you allowed bad guys to train. And we did overthrow them, but they've been clawing their way back. If you go through the history of Afghanistan, you will see, going in reverse, the United States having trouble. Although, is the United States government and economy and people completely wrecked by our participation in Afghanistan? Do you feel that economic pinch or something? I don't think so. Russia, the Soviet Union, in the 1990s, bogged down. In the 1980s, they're bogged down in Afghanistan. If you go before that, the British. If you go before that, we're going to see the Mughal Empire and the Persians. Even Alexander got bogged down there a bit. Certain parts of the world, they should put up a sign that says, beware. If you try to conquer this area, you might have taken off a little bit more than you had expected. Okay? Let's go to the last of the three empires that I want to talk about, the Mughal Empire for India. Now, this is an interesting one. The Mughal Empire, like the previous two, is Muslim. Mughal Empire, I want to say, is predominantly Sunni. Okay? In fact, if you look in places in the world, most of the Shiites you're going to find in the Persian region. So this is a Sunni empire. And it conquers India from the northwest. So the darker colors is the initial Mughal Empire established in northern India, and eventually it will establish control over most of India during this time period. So make sure you have this. This is an invading force into India. Muslims coming into India. So tell me, anyone, what is the predominant religion in India before the Muslims arrive? This is like really testing stuff that you would have covered quite a long time ago. Like really close. It's not Christianity. It's not Judaism. Obviously, it's not Muslim. It's not Islam. It's not the Islam. The Mughals that come in, and they have some connection and so forth to like Turkic peoples and Mongols. Buddhism, make a little note of this. Buddhism was like among the early religions that was established in India. And there's still some areas around India that have it, but it's a religion that goes even earlier than Buddhism. Starts with an H. Very good. India, write this down, is predominantly Hindu. So is there one God in Hinduism? No. Hinduism is very much like a polytheistic religion. In fact, a concept in Hinduism you do not find in Islam. In Islam, how many lives do you have? Uno. In Hinduism, Buddhism, how many lives are there? Multiple, multiple, multiple. In Hinduism, if you die, what happens to you? You guys, did you learn this before? Yeah? Reincarnation. That's a key term in Hinduism. You're reincarnated. And if you led a good life and so forth, then you'll be reincarnated into the next step up. It is a caste system. They've got the lowest and they've got the highest. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do in your lifetime, you might get born into a lower caste. So it's very structured that way. Got it? So that's how the Hindus are. And they have been that way for centuries and centuries. And different groups of people will come in and conquer and so forth. And they'll just be like, hey, whatever, you're here, let's convert you to Hinduism. Previous conquerors mostly converted to Hinduism. But write this down. The Muslim conquerors, the Mughals, they're not going to be converted to Hinduism. They might dress up like a Hindu Indian prince, but they're not going to convert necessarily to Hinduism. Okay? One of the great early Muslim Mughal rulers is Akbar. And no, it's not the same Akbar from the Star Wars series and so forth, where, you guys know? Yes? No? Okay. It's this guy. He's Sultan. He's a ruler. But look at this. He's already starting to dress up like a local Hindu prince. In Islam, Muhammad said, how many wives could you have if you're a Muslim and you can afford it? 4. Although a number of Muslim leaders will break that, bend it, and so forth. But when these guys get to rule, how many wives will they take? They're going to go the local way, and they're going to have as many as they can afford. And so these, like Sultan Akbar, will have many, 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 many. Yes. We're going to talk more about Mughal next time, because we have run out on our time this time. All right.